Three men walk into a bar. Two are in sales. One's a weirdo. Two have beards. Two are wearing snapbacks. Two don't drink. Two are American. And two are living in Canada. But which is which? It's all messed up. How does that happen? Well, it's obvious. It's because you're in Linky Land. How's that? Starting with a three guys walk into a bar joke that doesn't have punchline. Pretty good start to a podcast, right? Thank you for making it this far. I'm Tony Albrecht, your host of In Linky Land, a podcast about the power of creating and connecting on this platform. Well, I guess not this platform, in that we're engaging right now on a podcasting platform. I'm talking about LinkedIn. And today's episode, I'm going to get to it pretty quick. This is one that I think I've talked about on a previous episode, that I came up with the idea for this podcast in, I want to say it was September. Maybe it was more like August. I came up with it while I was out on a run. And it was the idea of a podcast that was basically just about LinkedIn. It was almost like fanfic for social media, which is so goofy. But I thought about it as this Mr. Rogers sort of deal, where you got people coming in and out. You got recurring characters knocking on doors. Maybe you got some goofy music. That vision has not been realized, which I imagine you've noticed. But I've really appreciated how gracious people have been with their time so far. And when I had that idea on that first day, and I stopped to start jotting stuff into my notes app, and I started jotting down ideas for episodes. This episode was one that was on that first list. And it features actually two gentlemen. I've had both of them as a coach for me in sales. Yeah, as you've probably heard by now, I transitioned from litigation to sales, a business development role, about a year ago. And both Darren McKee and Salman Mohiuddin came onto my radar at different times. Darren was one of the first people I started really paying attention to on LinkedIn. His approach to social selling was so, that buzzword from last week, authentic. You felt almost immediately like you knew Darren, and like he'd be a pretty good hang. That he's somebody you'd be interested to get to know more about. That came through almost immediately. I started not just following him, but frankly studying him. And I think a lot of how I approach the platform, where my strategy is be consistent, be interesting, and be generous. And I think Darren embodies that strategy so elegantly and so effectively, that a lot of what I've done, and hell, I mean, Darren at this point, he's up 55,000, something like that. Salman has come out of nowhere in a year to also be up around 50 plus thousand. It's wild, the growth of these two gentlemen. But the reason I wanted to put them together was the juxtaposition, because while Darren is all about the social selling and the showing up and being consistent and being yourself, Salman takes this very tactical approach and he shares the story in this episode about how he started posting on LinkedIn, that it came from a specific instance. And I remember seeing this post when he put it up, about a bad cold call he had coming in, and him stopping the guy and saying, let me give you some tips. And Salman has just started doing that en masse in a way that has helped a ton of people out here. And so they provide this nice yin and yang where Darren is super heavy on the relational side of selling, and Salman leans very heavily into the practicable and the actionable. Yeah, and if you were to spend time with the content of both of these gentlemen, you're going to get better at content creation. You're going to get better at selling. And to be honest with you, they are both such high character individuals. I don't think it's a stretch to say that they can help you be a better version of yourself, which is, to be honest with you, something I'm always looking for in these conversations. So Darren is also the co-founder of SaasBros, a company he started with his brother Eric, and they are just two of the most generous people you're going to see on LinkedIn. And what they've managed to build as a side hustle that's turning into something much bigger and more powerful is, to me, exemplary and something to be studied for those of us who are interested in building our own companies and taking the attention that we're able to collect and leverage it to make good things happen, right? Which ultimately is my hope for the future of capitalism and for business, is that the internet is giving us an opportunity to be creative, as is my corner, and connect dots in a way that we're able to make new valuable things that we can put out in the world and connect with the people who want them very easily. And SaasBros is such a great example of the creator economy in action. Salman, in addition to being an enterprise AE with Asana, has started his own sales academy called Salman's Sales Academy. Apparently he's workshopping the name. We'll see. It works. But he has started doing a cohort program that, as somebody who has worked with him, I've stopped working with both of them, actually, I should say, as I've now moved out of business development to a large degree and have started leaning into building my own startup company. But I can vouch for both of these guys as coaches, and certainly for what Salman is doing around teaching sales pros how to be more effective in their outreach and working deals. I 100% can vouch for him. So that's probably enough out of me. We get into some really good stuff here around our personal stories and how they came to start creating on LinkedIn, how they think about their different approaches and why they do what they do, how they think about other people starting to create on LinkedIn. And then we get into some of the details of the side hustles that they've been building. So without further ado, that's the first time I've used "without further ado" in this podcast. And the fact that it took me to this episode, I'm sort of happy about that, but I was really hoping to be able to go forever without saying "without further ado." So let's get to the conversation with Darren and Salman. Salman, Darren, thank you guys for joining me on the podcast. I'm going to frame this one as, I have a personal relationship with both of you in that you have both served as coach to myself in my previous sales role. And before we dive into the way that both of you have blown up on LinkedIn over the last really like, well, Salman for you this year and Darren over the last 2 years. Um, let's just start with quick intros. Who you are, where you're calling in from, and what you care about and what you do on LinkedIn, what you talk about.
Okay, thanks, Darren. First of all, pleasure to be on this show. Tony, really appreciate the opportunity. Once again, my name is Salman Mohiuddin. I am a strategic enterprise account executive at a company called Asana, based out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I don't know if, Darren, you've been up here. I know, obviously, Tony has, great city, love it here, largest, populated city in Canada, fourth largest in North America. It could be third now, but love it here. Born and raised in Canada, have a beautiful wife and 3 girls at home. So it's pretty much a zoo at home, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And, started my LinkedIn journey about 14 or 15 months ago, started following Darren very, very early in my journey, and I really look up to him and seeing your growth as well, Tony. And just really happy to be engaged with this wonderful community on LinkedIn, and people supporting each other, and just really, really love the opportunity of growth I've seen over the last year.
Right. Amazing. On. Yeah, I was, for those listening, like there was a conversation prior to before we hit record. And I was just saying that like, this is just such a special group, because these are 2 men that like, I feel like honestly close to as true friends, and not just connections or followers on LinkedIn or somebody that I've chatted to or with. And that's the power of this. I think that's the power of this community. And that's what I leaned into when I first started this journey. When I first started, it was like, oh, it's a job resume, or it's a place where I push out new products, or it's a place where I talk about my company all the time. And then slowly, as I continued to grow, it became a place where I built relationships with basically my personal board of directors and people that like support me and care about me and champion me. And so, it's been crazy growth. I'm a little bit slower in the growth mode, right? Like March 3rd, 2020, I had like 2,000 followers, and have slowly grown over the last 900 and something days. And so for me, it's more about no niche. It's more about being me, and me being a dad to 2 amazing children, and a wife that pushes me and challenges me and keeps me accountable as well. I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, no affiliation with UNC or Duke, both great schools, both great programs. I happen to live next door to a UNC soccer coach, so I'm always at the UNC games. But that's me as a whole. If I'm not working or hanging out with my family, I'm fishing or hunting, and I'm always out in the woods. And so if you can't get me, I don't have phone signal because I'm out there. But that's me as a whole. And
I want to frame how we're gonna to unpack this conversation. I wanted to talk to the 2 of you specifically because, well, Darren says he's grown slowly, but I mean, Darren, you're at, it looks like 57,500 or so people in your network. Salman, you've broken 51,000, which is just, it is bonkers. So when Darren says he's grown slowly, it's only relative to like Salman and maybe like 2 other people in the world. Otherwise, Darren, as Salman said, you were somebody he started following early on and started paying attention to. And that was definitely the case for me. You were one of the first people I was paying attention to when I started trying to think about LinkedIn differently a year ago now. And your approach is very much it's social selling, right? It's like, that's very much how you approach it. Very relational, very likable. And but it is that relational piece that you really lean on and sharing your experience. And Salman, you've come along and also very likable. You've taken what I describe as a very educational approach, where your stuff tends to be very tactical in what you're sharing, that you're sharing very specific lessons, pieces of advice, experiences that often seem to have come from earlier today or from this week that you're picking up on that you can share? And so the two of you have taken such different approaches to how to approach specifically this sales corner of LinkedIn, which I think is probably the most vibrant corner of LinkedIn. Maybe tech would be a bigger, but the sales corner of LinkedIn is a huge place. And the two of you have done such an amazing job of building stuff in that space. I want to start with, Darren, you got into how you started a little bit, but I want to unpack those experiences for both of you, how you went from that, LinkedIn is a job site or a place for my digital resume, to seeing it, I described this matrix-like quality where all of a sudden it opens up into this totally other thing. And yeah, I'd like to just start there with how that happened for both of you.
Yeah, I can jump in there real quick. I think I grew up playing sports, right? My brother, Eric McKee, is 5 years older than me, right? So I always had someone to look up to, someone that was a little bit better than me at everything, but he was actually probably the same quality as I was at the age that I'm at, right? And so when I started LinkedIn and I had 2,000 followers and I started sharing like personal content, I didn't take it personally, because like while in sports when I was a kid, I was looking up to my brother. Now I was looking up to Dale Dupree, and I was looking up to Morgan Ingram, and I was looking up to Tabitha Kavanaugh and Gary Vee, and like all of these people that like I knew that if I just did what they did and with my own flair, I would eventually get to that point. And so I could always see a finish line. I could always see like what was ahead of me. So I never got in my head too much of like, oh man, I only got 400 people to look at this thing, because I was like, pretty sure Morgan got 400 when he first started as well. And so I always tried to visualize it. And then there was just that compounding effect of like, okay, time after time after time again. And I'm a fan of consistency in pretty much everything that I do. And I was like, I'm just going to do it every day. And I'm going to do something that no one else has ever done, and see what the heck happens. And now what's happening is 1,000 followers a week for the last 7 weeks in a row.
Well, and going back to, you said March 2020, and you and I have talked about this story, but just give us a sense of what was going on as COVID started and how that changed your approach to sales in the way that it seems like you were certainly an early person to leverage LinkedIn in a different way in sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was selling, like, I think both of you guys know this about me, and a lot of people that are listening probably know this, but like I was selling HR, payroll, and benefits, right, to SMB. When I say SMB, I mean like 4 to 30 person companies, right? Like these are like HVAC, plumbing, electrician, real estate firms, like these tiny companies in my town that like I would just grab my bag every morning. Literally, I would grab this exact same bag and I would just start walking down Main Street, and I would be like, all right, I'm just knocking on doors. And then all of a sudden my boss is like, hey, we can't do that anymore. And I was like, what? Like, all I do is shake hands and build relationships. I don't really know like any, and hang out in coffee shops where like I know people frequent, so I can see their name tags, right? They would come in and see their name. I'd be like, oh dude, you work there, and we would talk. And then I was like, what am I going to do? I have to feed my family. I've got kids on the way. And I was like, well, LinkedIn's the only place where like a lot of these people actually are. So I'm just going to start sharing like thought leadership and things around my company. And hopefully somebody sees me. And people started seeing me. And I was like, well, this is kind of cool. I actually can like hang out in my house with my kids and not have to go knock on a bunch of doors over and over and over again. And I just continued to do that. And when I was selling that HR software payroll solution, I was working for a company called Insperity, who I credit like a lot of my success to. When people thought HR payroll or PEO, they thought of me, not necessarily that company. And then I would take them to that company and we would do business together, right? And so I wanted to be that subject matter expert in that point. And so that's how it all started. And then I was like, well, this is really cool. And I did it at every other company since then. And it's been a beautiful thing, but I do miss knocking on doors.
That is so, I hadn't heard you describe that part about the coffee shop. That seems like such a throwback. Like being there.
Throwback.
Wow, that's amazing. Salman, how about you?
Yeah, sure. So there's some background. So I'm originally from Fort McMurray, Alberta. I think I might have told you this, Tony. It's a small town in northern Alberta, and I have two older brothers. So similar to Darren, having an older brother, and my parents migrated from India to Toronto actually back in the late 70s or mid to late 70s. And then my dad got a job with the oil company in Alberta. That's where oil is really big, as you know, Tony and Darren there. And Fort McMurray back then, back in the mid late 80s, very small town, like literally 35,000 people, no diversity at all. Like we were one of the probably 10 colored families there. And it wasn't easy growing up. There was some racism. It wasn't very diverse. My mom got divorced at when I was about 5 or 6 years old. So she was a single mom for probably 5 or 6 years, taking care of 3 boys. Not easy. And it's not like she had a good education, right? She was taking college courses on the side, but she was working at pizza shops, at donut shops for minimum wage. I had no idea how she was putting food on the table at dinner time or making lunches. I had no clue. And I slowly realized, like, wow, she's done so much. And my mom got remarried. We moved to Toronto when I was 10, and I've been in Toronto since. And within my family, the 3 brothers, I was someone that, even though being the youngest, my 2 older brothers looked up to me because I was the one that kind of like was probably the most educated. I was the one that kind of broke into corporate America, but North America, you could say. And I was the one who was working part-time jobs during high school and university to support my mom as well, who was struggling a bit, and even my dad, my stepdad at the time. And it wasn't easy. So for me, it was like I was looked up to as the golden child of the family, saying, wow, someone's going to take us to the next level. And and if you know any South Asian families, you have any friends, typically their family or their parents want them to become 3 things: either a doctor or engineer or a lawyer. And I wasn't a fan of any of those. I just didn't want to. And I had sales jobs similar to knocking on doors, like I did back in the day when I was like 13 years old, knocking on doors, selling newspaper subscriptions for the Toronto Star. I wanted to get into sales. That's something I had passion for. I was selling newspapers. I was in call centers. I was in telemarketing. I was in all that sort of fun stuff. So when I told my mom, hey, I want to get into tech sales, she said, if you're going to do it, just make us proud. And I think I have so far. But in a nutshell, before I started engaging on LinkedIn, I had about 15 years of sales experience, majority of my career at tech sales companies like IBM and Salesforce, and currently at Asana, a couple of startups in between. And, for me, similar to Darren, I wasn't really engaged on LinkedIn at all. I had 1,600 followers in July or August of 2021. And before that, I was just sharing content on LinkedIn, like company content, maybe like once every 2 months. Oh, here's a webinar, here's that. I wasn't engaged at all. But then I slowly started engaging, where I was following people like Darren, who I really looked up to, because keep in mind, he still is pretty much an individual contributor, and he had like 20,000 followers at that. I'm like, oh my God, like you would see like CROs and VPs of sales and sales managers, people gravitate to them because they're in leadership positions by default. But having an IC with that type of following, I was like, this guy's doing something right. So I followed him. I followed folks like Brandon Fluharty and other people that are well-known names in sales. And I was like, okay, something's right here. And then there was one experience, I'll end off with this. There was one experience that got me to start sharing more on LinkedIn. I was at Asana in my first few months there, and SDR reached out to me on my cell phone. And, usually SDRs don't reach out to me because, like, again, I'm just an account executive, but from time to time I'll get a call. So this person called me, and it wasn't a great call. It wasn't a great cold call from this random company. And I paused them for a second. I said, listen, you probably don't get this often, but you mind if I share a little bit of feedback? And they said, yeah, sure. So I gave them some tips on how they should approach the call. Hey, we're a publicly traded company. You can find a lot of stuff on us online. You made it more about you versus us. And he said, listen, nobody shared, in all my cold calling, nobody shared that type of feedback. So I appreciate it. So I decided to make my first official personal brand post on LinkedIn the next day talking about that experience. It got a whole bunch of engagement. You can probably look back about 14, 15 months ago and find that post. And then I spoke to my wife that same night. I said, there's something here. Like, there's something here on LinkedIn where I have 15, 16 years of tech sales experience. I've been pretty good. Why don't I share those experiences? And I started sharing. It started into twice a week to weekdays. I saw Darren posting on the weekends. I'm like, who posts on the weekends? And I'm like, everyone's engaging. Let me do that too. And it just took off from there. So, Darren played a huge part in inspiring me as well.
It's awesome. I love that.
It really is. So listening to both of you describe your experiences of how you came to really start sharing more on the platform, and then the way you really have just both gone nuts. Part of my frankly fascination with both of you is how you've taken these opportunities, and like, clearly your business, what you're doing as salespeople. Then you're also leveraging what you're doing out here to find other ways to be of use to people, right? To build other projects, other businesses. So Darren, you and Eric have SaasBros, and I'm going to want you to unpack that a little bit for us. And then Salman, you've obviously, well, you both do some coaching, obviously, as I said. And Salman, I know you've gotten into like running a cohort as well, and I'd be interested to hear kind of more of the thought process around how you built, like how you've gone through that process. But taking a step back, it's easy to look at people, and you've both mentioned some of like the stars in sales. And I mean, frankly, I think of both of you as stars in the sales space, right? But you've mentioned these other people, and it's so easy to take somebody who's kind of on that pedestal, right? Who's like arrived, quote unquote, and see them as different in some way. But one thing I've appreciated about both of you, and I mean, so Salman, I'm proud to say I knew you when you were still at like 10,000 or so. Yeah, like I think I was fairly early to the Salman game. And Darren, I think you were at maybe 22 or 23,000 when I first started following you, which, I mean, still sizable followings. But what you two have done is both unique and singular to you, but also something that is accessible to other people, right? The opportunities you've taken advantage of are available to pretty much anybody who's willing and able to take their experiences, share them in a way that you're then, getting that feedback that you both mentioned of people like coming to you, and then finding out ways to help other people. And so part of this podcast motivation is, it's still a very small percentage of people who produce content on LinkedIn, right? It's, maybe 1%. Nick Bennett, on last week's episode, he mentioned that number may be approaching 4%. I don't know where he got that, but sounds possible. But there's still so much space on the platform. And I'm getting to a question here, I promise. But Darren, you mentioned like looking at some of those bigger people, and I think it would be so easy to have that be discouraging, right? That when you post something and it only gets seen by 400 people, saying, "Oh, I can't do that. Nobody's going to pay attention to me, right? Like, how could I get there?" So I was interested in how you frame that you actually saw that as looking at somebody out there and actually seeing that likeness, saying like, I am pretty much like this person. If they could do it, I could do it as well. So I just want to unpack a little more how the two of you think about that process of getting started and starting to show up. You know, Salman, you mentioned starting at like twice a week. How you thought about that, and yeah, and like getting over those insecurities that I imagine just about all of us have.
Yeah, good one. A lot to unpack. I think Salman said a minute ago that he grew up in a town of 35,000 people, Fort McMurray, whatever it was, I don't remember. Likewise, South Texas, oil field. So we've got some similarities there. And I think, and I have a reason why I'm saying this, right? Everybody knew everybody in that town. And so you couldn't really hide. And you built community around you, and you built relationships around you to champion you and to leverage you and to motivate you and to hold you accountable. Whenever I was early on, right, I knew that I couldn't do any of this alone, right? And I had a bunch of people that were like, you're absolutely crazy. Why would you do this? You get the question. I get this question probably 6 times a week. Hey, how much money are you making on LinkedIn? I'm like, yo, it's not about that. There are a lot of things that I have monetized. There are a lot of things that I've been able to build because of this. But for me, when I was starting early on, it was like, all right, how do I build a community, right? Like, how do I build an inspirational group of individuals that will champion and move each other and help each other and build each other and challenge each other, right? The challenge part came later because I was a little bit scared to like actually say my point. My favorite rapper of all time is Toby Nwigwe, and he says, listen, go be yourself unless yourself is trash, right? And so like I leaned into my story. I leaned into the fact that like I barely graduated high school. I tried college, knew it wasn't for me, didn't have any jobs right out of college, lived in Manhattan making like $11 an hour. And I just started to like say like, all right, these are my stories. And there's gotta be another guy or another gal or another individual that is out there that could like take this and be like, oh, I can get out of this hole that I'm in. And so that was my process. It was like, all right, I'm just going to share, because I know in one of those 400, somebody's saying like, oh, this is like, I have a chance. And I had so many people that said that for me. And so I always took all of those guys that I looked up to and gals that I looked up to as like inspiration of like, I can get there. I will get there. Right. Like I would just like visualize like me with like 100,000 people in a stadium, like reading my content. Right. And I will tell you this one thing, my content when I first started, probably just as good as it is now. Nobody saw it though. Right. And so I would tell you, like, if you're posting right now and you're not getting engagement, it's not that your words aren't great. It's just that you haven't done it enough yet, right? It's like, you know, Salman, you're a big basketball player, right? Like sometimes it takes a while to even get to overseas and then get to the G League and then get seen and then get to the NBA. And then you're like 8th on the bench and then you finally get a chance to go shine. And like, that's your time. It took 7 years. It took me 3 years to get to this point, 974 days in a row. It just doesn't happen overnight. But building relationships with guys like you has been like super inspirational for me, because I still have days where I'm like, oh man, like yesterday was a terrible day on LinkedIn. I was like, I don't even know what I was posting. I didn't get great engagement like I normally do. And I was like, did I do something wrong? And it was like, nope, just another day.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Darren. I love your story. And like I said, you mentioned consistency. It's like, yeah, like there's not enough eyes on your content and it takes time. And you're the most consistent person I know on LinkedIn, hands down, like bar none. You're posting on the weekends, you're posting on the weekdays, and it's content that resonates with people no matter where they're at in their journey, whether they're a salesperson, whether they're a father or a mother or a parent or somebody single, it doesn't matter. There will be content throughout the week that will resonate with people. That's what I love about it. And, you know, similar to yourself, I think, you know, when I started building content, I realized that I have a similar story to share. And there's kind of 2 key aspects that I would bucket my content into that resonates with those 2 buckets. Number one is, to your point earlier, Tony, yeah, I share more tactical sales content, because when I was observing LinkedIn before, what I noticed that there was a little bit of a gap where there wasn't enough actionable sales content that somebody in sales, whether they have 1 year experience or 10 years of experience, could look at it and action on that right away and see results in their role. There was some of it, but there wasn't enough. So I thought, if I have some experience I can share and share some actionable sales content and advice and tips, that could resonate with a lot of people. And it started resonating. And then I saw another bucket where people were reaching out to me saying, hey, it's great to see another brown dude in sales driving content and another Muslim in sales. And I started posting a little bit about diversity in sales right now, being a person who doesn't drink alcohol and being in the sales environment can be a little bit difficult. And there's a variety of reasons where people won't drink. It may be because they've been sober for quite a while. It could be that, they don't drink for health reasons or religious reasons. And after a few of those posts, random people started reaching out to me saying, hey, I appreciate that. I've been sober for the last 8 years. And, it's not easy. Every day is a challenge, right? But this is getting easier. Or, hey, I'm a person who doesn't drink and I'm in sales or I'm entering the sales field. How do you navigate that when every other company event is centered around alcohol? So that message was resonating with people, and I share it from time to time as well, because throughout my tenure in sales, it's been a challenge sometimes where there's been company events centered around alcohol. I've been teased about not drinking alcohol at events, sipping on a ginger ale where everyone's, getting hammered sometimes, and being part of that bro culture, having dietary restrictions as well, and having limited options where, leaders wouldn't check to see if I could eat something or not. And I wanted to share those experiences because I know for a fact there's people that are going through that today. And if I can be some sort of voice for them saying, hey, I feel what you feel, that's important. And then getting back to the first point about sales is that, and this, Tony and Darren, from your experience, sales is full of ups and downs. It's full of peaks and valleys. I haven't met anyone that's had like 20 quarters of breaking quota by 200%. It just doesn't happen. And it's difficult. It can be very stressful. And having that voice is saying, hey, if you're having a bad quarter, it's okay. Sales is full of peaks and valleys. You got to be patient, which is probably the most rare quality that I see in sales. You have to have resilience, and things will take time. Be patient, keep your head up. I was put on a PIP earlier in my career, a performance improvement plan, where I sucked for quite a while. And I even questioned myself, is sales even right for me? And I share this story sometimes on LinkedIn, and it resonates. People reached out to me saying, I'm on a PIP, what do I do? And I'll jump on a call and share thoughts. So I try to share content that's not just actionable, resonates with individuals as well.
Man, I'm envisioning a playbook called I'm on a PIP, what do I do? Because everyone's on a PIP right now. I love it.
There's an idea for somebody to take and run with, right?
I mean, go for it.
One thing that's clear from listening to the two of you talk about this is, what's coming to mind is authenticity. And it's this word that's vague. And I mean, as it turns out, it seems like we don't really agree on what the word means. So it means different things to a lot of different people, but I tend to think of it basically as being genuine, that what you're sharing is just true and real for your experience of the world. And both of you do that in really resonant ways, which I think is a huge factor in your success on the platform. And you have very different stories, you have very different approaches. But Salman, I mean, I remember your drinking post. My biggest post ever was a post about 12 years since my last drink. And putting that out there in the context of my background in litigation, I did get a lot of really gracious feedback on that from people in the DMs. And it's also the only post where I've ever actually gotten somebody trolling me a little bit, which was fantastic. That's new influencer level unlocked, right? But there's that's something when I know when I'm talking to people who are wanting to get started or trying to gain traction, uh, it's hard to come with that level of authenticity of just like coming from that place of sharing your story. When it seems that on the professional network like this, there's this idea that being professional sort of means that you have it all figured out or that you fit in with whatever the ideal of sales bro culture is, right? Or for me, what being an attorney looks like, which is also tends to be hard charging, hard drinking culture, right? And there's real value in our being able to just stand out as ourselves. I want to dig into what you both have done to kind of take some of the energy you've collected and the attention you've collected and start building stuff that can help people get better at what they do. Darren, since you started first, will you talk about SaasBros and how you and Eric came up with that? And I know it's snowballed like crazy.
Yeah, I will gladly do that. I will go back to like us sitting around our fire and Eric saying, man, like, can you believe we're in sales, like tech sales? And I was like, no, can't believe it. Because a couple years ago, he was running a nonprofit, in ministry for hundreds of students traveling around the world, and had no quote unquote sales background. And I was running mail rooms for the Charlotte Hornets and Kilpatrick Townsend law firm, and had no sales experience, right? But like we were like, hey, I think we would be really good at this, and everybody was like, nah, you're probably gonna suck. And then fast forward, like newsflash, like we didn't suck at it. And we were like, all right, how do we help other people that are starting to feel like they can't do this, right? And like one night, literally, we're sitting around the fire. We're like, let's just start putting out some content around like, hey, let's help 100 people break into tech sales. And I was like, how are we going to do that? And he was like, well, we're just going to share content. We're going to introduce people. We're going to call talent acquisition departments. We're going to call CROs. And we're going to just help people get in. And so we did that. And it was like 10, 20, 30, 35, 40 people just breaking into the industry. And we had made like $0, y'all, because like we didn't care about it, right? And then all of a sudden we were like, we should make a brand, right? Like we've grown this following. Eric's, I don't know, 20-something thousand. I'm 57. Let's make a logo. So we paid somebody a good chunk of dollars to like make a good logo, because I'm a big fan of logos, right? I think like they're big to start the brand going. Like the stuff is everywhere, right? Like, but we started doing that, and we're like, all right, maybe we'll make a playbook. Everybody's making a playbook. Let's do it. And then like 700 people bought the playbook. Look at that. You got it on. I love it. I don't even have mine on. And we're like, let's make a playbook, right? And then we were like, yeah, but let's not make a playbook. Let's make like a really badass playbook. Let's make it like 43 pages and have like hip hop references and crazy stuff and tag people, and get somebody to like edit it and make it beautiful for us and pay a good amount of money for that, right? And we did it, and people started buying it. They were like, this is great. And then it went to 40 and 50 people breaking into the industry. And then a couple like mentors of ours were like, guys, you guys are kind of stupid. And you probably wasted like $300,000 already. And we were like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, you should just form your LLC first of all. And you should start acting like a recruiting agency on the back end and start actually placing some of these people, because I know recruiting firms that haven't placed 40 people in 3 years. And so
can I pause you right there? So I know Eric posts about being an entrepreneur and how he's got all these different businesses. And I mean, you clearly also have sort of an entrepreneurial bent to you. When you guys started helping people break in, did you not see that model, that recruiting model? And you're shaking your head no. So you didn't see that. So when you started, you were like, let's help other people do that. I presume that it was like, let's build a business
community
around this. Yeah, but so when you started, you didn't know how you were going to monetize it at all?
We didn't, man. We were sitting around the fire and we were like, what if we could like pay our car payments with this stuff? like literally that's what we were thinking. Like maybe we could make like $500 a piece per month. And like, this would be great. And like, you know, we're just making some content and I'm paying for a new 4Runner because I've been driving a crappy RAV4 forever. Right. Like that's literally what we were thinking about. And then like, happen, right? And we were like, well, there's a vision for like way more here. And then we started calling like CROs and VPs of sales, and they were like, well, we need somebody that comes from this industry. It's got 8 years of experience, that's had this amount of quota, that has this kind of deal cycles. And I'm like, cool, that sounds great. Let's look at your top performers really quick while I have you on the phone. And I would just pause, and they would pull up a dashboard, and I'd be like, all right, let's look at the top 5. And the top 5 would be like the girl that was a barista, the teacher that transitioned to tech, the stay-at-home mom that came back, the person that was a 2-year SDR for the team. And it was always like these people that weren't what they were asking me for. And I was like, all right, like that moment, I knew we had something. I knew we had something that we could actually move. And so we after giving away for free for so long, we had all of these candidates. I mean, like thousands of candidates in like a database and platform that we could that pushed to each other. And we had a couple months. We had a couple really good months, and we had a crappy month, a good month, a crappy month. And now here's where we are today, right? Like Eric's running the business full time. It's completely replaced his director of sales salary from where he was at. I'm not necessarily one that wants to jump in full swing because I'm at Sky and loving what I do. But I'm supporting him on the back end. And now it's like, where do we go now? And there's so many avenues, and we're building products around a logo, and we're building products around 2 faces, to eventually, who knows what could happen with the business. And so all of that wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have showed up on here on LinkedIn. Because again, I'm just a kid from a 35,000 person town that dropped out of college, that didn't know anything about technology sales, that started creating content 3 years ago.
It is so wild. That's like when you lay it out, that's so crazy. And since this is an audio format, we'll just say that the SaasBros logo, it is really distinct, that it's the 2 fists out with the tattooed knuckles with SaasBros tattooed across them. You guys did a great job. I mean, you've established a really strong brand, and I love the point around through the work on LinkedIn that the 2 of you had done. You had found this niche around like sales, and like, I mean, I know Eric's line is something like, let the hungry in, watch them eat. Yeah. Which, I mean, that was really strong. And that was his line.
Can I talk about that really quick?
Sure.
So before we ever were around the fire, he used to drop the fork and plate and spoon emoji on like all of our posts. And that's literally what got people going. Like, and then we were like, why are people liking this darn thing? And then we used to write like that we were brothers on like everything that we did. And then, you know, it was like, holy crap, like we should like, let's just do this thing. And like, right, you said like, what's the worst could happen? We fail. Like and no one ever remembers the SB logo ever again. Now we can't do that because that would be terrible. But you know, back in the early days, it was like, let's just give it a go, and the community supported us.
Yeah, it's so cool to have seen what the 2 of you are building in such a short amount of time. I mean, to me, you know, my strategy on LinkedIn over the last year, which I think I've ripped off from you largely, Darren, is just be consistent, be interesting, which is to talk about things that matter to me, and be generous. And I actually, both of you embody, frankly, all of those things. But just that idea that when you do that, and I'm aiming this at people who are like earlier in the journey, it has the ability to change what you're looking at, that the opportunities start presenting themselves. That, I mean, hell, that as of this week, I'm running my own little shop where I'm helping law firms leverage LinkedIn. If you would have told me even 1 year ago today that this is what I would be doing for a living, I would have found it literally impossible that that is what I'm doing. It's happened so quickly that, I mean, frankly, it's been discombobulating. But Salman, I want to get into your approach to this, because I'm guessing that what SaasBros has done has influenced how you're thinking about building out your deal.
Well, first of all, it's influenced my kids because they're saying SaasBros around the house. I swear to you, I wear the shirt often, just lounging around with my sweatpants, and there's like SaasBros. Yeah, I'm like, I'm telling you, man, the kids love it. So keep doing what you're doing. And I want to get back to your earlier point around authenticity, Tony, because what authenticity means to me is more about like the foundation that you've built of who you are. Are you the same person at home as the person outside externally talking to people? Do you act the same way at home with your partner, with your children, with your family, with your cousins, and your aunts and uncles, and act the same way outside, or are you different? That's what authenticity is to me. So that's point number one. And point number two is, it's inspiring to see what Darren and his brother Eric have done. I've been following them for quite a while now, and it's just incredible, the transformation. I love Eric's story, just, from the ministry to SDR to director to now doing this. It's inspiring and incredible. And then Darren just being a part of that and being so inspiring and growing at the same time. It's been the brand, it's transformational. But getting back to what I've done is that when I started posting about sales content, it was a slow approach. Like there was not a lot of eyes on it. And Darren, you had a great post about this either yesterday or today. You said, when I had a slow following and a large a guy or gal with a personal brand that had a large following, if they commented on my post, that would mean the world to me. Like having like a person with a $50,000 following commenting on someone that has like 5,000, that means the world to you. Like, oh my God, look at this. And you did that for me, right? Early on, right? You did that for me early on. I was like, when like, and honest to God, when you commented on my post, when I had like 3,000 followers, I was like, this is amazing. Oh my God, Darren McKee's posting on my post. I felt so good because obviously it drives more eyes on it and visibility. And I'm trying to return the favor too for a lot of people as well. And I don't even know how I'm doing it, but I am. And
so hard.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine. Like, okay, now people are looking at me like this is like, it's crazy. But getting back to my original point, when I started posting actionable sales content on LinkedIn, it slowly got it gaining traction because I started at twice a week, then I started 5 days a week, then I started almost every day. And the thing is, having a full-time job, having 3 kids at home, and this as well with your families, it can be difficult to dedicate time and giving it back. But for me, yes, I got a lot of, in my first probably 6 months of posting, I was giving away my time for free. People were reaching out saying, hey, I've been put on the PIP. Can you help me out? Hey, I have an interview coming up. Hey, I'm working on this deal. Do you mind sharing some advice? Hey, I'm a BDR here, or I'm an account executive. Do you mind sharing some advice on how I can build more pipeline? I was more than happy to dedicate my time. I was probably jumping on calls almost every day with a different individual for about 15, 20 minutes. And it just got a point within my first 6 months. It was just overwhelming. I just couldn't handle it. I'm like, I got a full-time job. I got a family. Those are my priorities. I just couldn't handle it. And I talked to a few individuals. I talked to Eric McKee. Darren, I spoke to Eric. I spoke to you as well. But specifically, I spoke to Eric. I gave him a call, and he remembers this, maybe 7 months ago. I asked, like, what would you do in my position? And, we agreed that there's nothing wrong to prioritize and protect your time. And how do you do that? By monetizing it in a way where you're giving your expertise, but you're also protecting and prioritizing your time. Because if I just gave away my time for free and taking 3 calls a day with individuals, great individuals who are reaching out, I probably wouldn't be performing at the level I want to at work. And I wouldn't be performing with my family, after work. And I know both of you are big proponents of that. So, I took a lot of that advice from people like Darren, Eric, and other folks as well. And I said, listen, I just basically put together a quick Calendly and a Stripe account. And I said, listen, if you're looking for real tactical advice where we can sit down for an hour and I can provide my expertise, then in order to protect my time and give you my full self, then I have to do it this way. And it came to a point where I was doing one-to-one coaching as well, which I still do. And I told my wife I will only set aside time from about 5 p.m. till 6 p.m. on weekdays, so I could only limit the number of clients to a very small amount. And I ran it by my leadership team as well, and they were fully supportive of it, which I'm very thankful for. And again, I had to turn down people because I couldn't take so much. And then a couple of other individuals said, hey, you might want to start doing a group coaching cohort, because number one, it might be more cost effective for people, and number two, you're protecting your time even more because you're only dedicating 1 hour a week. Now, bear in mind, the last 8 weeks where I've started this cohort, I've had to make some time in, after the kids go to bed, to build out the program and the decks and all that, which has taken some time. But the fact is, like, I tell people, and there's two sides of the fence on this on LinkedIn. I've seen some posts where they say, hey, why should people be monetizing their LinkedIn brand? And other people are like, it's okay if you're doing it for the right reasons. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm on the second fence where I say, hey, I gave my stuff away for free, and I still do, for months and months and months. My content, people are resonating with it. I have to put my job and my family first. It's not like I'm doing this full time. It's a side hustle. I got a full-time job. There's nothing wrong with monetizing your time if you're protecting it and if you're giving back to the community. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I still jump on calls with people that need sales advice and interview advice, and I'll do it for free, and that's totally fine. But, what I'm trying to do is, with this Salman Sales Academy, I just made that up literally like 2 months ago. Maybe I'm going to keep that name, maybe I'm not, but I think I'm building a brand around this academy where I'm up-leveling sales people and really want to take them to the next level so they can utilize these skills and start performing better at work, start building consistency in their approach, being confident on calls with customers. And that's really what I'm trying to do. And, if you were to ask me, similar to yourself, Tony, like you asked yourself a year ago, would I be in this position? If I had asked myself even 8 months ago to be in the position, I'd laugh at someone if they said that. And, right now, I don't even know where things are going to take me in the next 4 months, but I'm probably going to continue with this brand, continue helping people, and, just continue to do what I'm doing.
Yeah. Can I add something there, Tony? I think we would be remiss if we all three didn't thank the spouse in our life that, like, when we didn't see it and we didn't see the path or envision it, they knew that we could do it. And like, I think we're all three very fortunate to have that in our corner. Because when I need to get on a call at 8 or 5 to 6 or 5 a.m. in the morning, she is literally handling those minions, maybe not pleasantly, but like doing it. And that part is just like, I can't thank them enough. There needs to be a cohort for sales moms. Married to sales people, moms.
Darren drops another business idea in here. And I absolutely 100%, as I have 2 little ones under the age of 4 are around here. But so I want to circle back on something you just said, that tension around starting to monetize what you do on LinkedIn and that attention. Is you mentioned 2 different kinds of people. There would be people who would say you shouldn't be doing that. Have you run across much of that? That people, it's essentially a sellout argument, right? That we should be doing what we're doing on LinkedIn for the love of the game, I guess, that if you're monetizing it, then it cheapens it or distorts what we might otherwise call as being authentic or being genuine. I assume I'm not at a level where that's a problem that I've faced, as I just passed 5,000, but I'd be interested to hear a little more about what that's looked like, that tension for the two of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I can share some thoughts and then let Darren share his thoughts. But I've seen quite a bit of it. And here's what I'll say. I think some of those individuals that say that, they don't know much about you and the history of what you've been doing on LinkedIn. And I'm not shy about saying that. For the first 6 or 7 months, I was giving away my content for free, and people were getting, I can have the DMs to prove it. There's about 40 people that have gotten job offers because of the interview content that I posted, or calls that I've had with them for free. There's people that have closed deals and progressed deals because of the content I've been posting. So I think there's people that come and say that, but they don't know what you've done because they haven't been following you for a while. They don't know the impact, or I just haven't shared the impact with them. So for those that say that, I say, look at the person, the individual, and the value that they're bringing people. And it's okay to protect your time if you don't have that time to give, and monetizing that. And some people are doing it full time. There's people that are doing full-time coaching gigs, and they're posting content on LinkedIn, and that's their source of income to support their family, right?
Well, and there's this weird thing that happens somewhere along the way. And for me, it was around the point where I hit 3,000, where there was just a leveling up, where it was like, oh, I could spend 10 hours a day on LinkedIn if I wanted to. Like so I mean, I think about where the two of you are at, and it boggles my little mind of like just how many people you could engage with. And I think when we're starting out, and I mean, a year ago, I was at 368. That's where I was. You can't really understand what it's like. I mean, I shudder to think of what your DMs look like. It just has to be overwhelming in a way that you have to systematize, or you have to put boundaries in place, or it'll just eat you up. Is that fair? Is that right?
I think it can. These aren't crazy. Oftentimes I will tell people, hey, give me a call next Thursday at 2. It's the message I'll send to pretty much everyone. And 1 out of 10 people will call me Thursday at 2. And so I can ignore the 9 that sent me the message, right? Like that's how I like source out the fluff, right? That's how I disqualify a lead in my DMs. And yes, you could spend 10 hours a day. Could I spend 10 hours a day here? Absolutely. Do I sometimes? Absolutely. Because over the last 4 days, with Sky, I've booked 7 first meetings with Fortune 1000 companies based on them like seeing my content. They wouldn't see my content if I wasn't on LinkedIn, right? Like haven't sent them an email, haven't cold called them. They just happen to see my stuff. And so like, as you continue to grow, that stuff starts to happen. You end up spending more time because that's like your source of truth when it comes to prospecting and sales. I just don't let it overwhelm me anymore, man. Like I get people that are like, hey man, I've reached out to you. Do you not care about me? And I'm like, or like, hey, I'm posting content, but you're not engaging with me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. But like to the money piece and to the monetizing piece, I mean, Salman said it best. I think the reason why people are so upset about it right now is because people come in, they get 1,000 followers, they create a course, they create a cohort, they start charging people $2,500, then they don't do it anymore. And then you never hear from them again. And so people get burned. And that's happening. That's happening every single day. Hey, I'm going to charge you $1,800 for this. We're going to do coaching sessions for the year. And then all of a sudden they're never on LinkedIn again, and everybody lost their money. It's happening every day. And so people are weary. And so I always go back to this, right? Like when me and Eric make hoodies, we make really high quality hoodies and we get them to people. When we make a course, we make a really high quality course and we follow through, right? Like, because that's what we do. But there's so many people that don't do that, which is really just crowding space, making it really difficult.
Yeah, that's a great point. And coming back to the DMs, like, I don't know, Darren, you're like a king with the DMs. Even when I have a smaller following, like this guy would reply before I even sent the message. I don't know how he did it, but it's like crazy. But yeah, for me, that's actually a good tactic. I like Darren, like kind of throwing out, hey, here's my cell number. Call me next week at this time. I haven't tried that before. I'm still struggling trying to, like, I'm probably a week and a half behind DMs, but I do like that approach. I might take that approach where I just say, hey, listen, call me at this number next week. That'll filter out the fluff. I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, I mean, Eric uses the out of the away message.
Oh yeah,
and like he has a Calendly in there, and if you want to book time with him, it's costs money, and like it's there, it's easy, it makes it happen. So there's so many different ways to do it. I don't know. DMs are funny, especially when they work. Sometimes they don't even work. Mine's not working right now.
I've been having a real hard time on mobile, just actually having my DMs go through, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I want to be mindful of your time. We've been rolling for about an hour now. Obviously, I'll be linking to your LinkedIn profiles. I will be linking to SaasBros. Is there anything else you want to make sure? And I know Salman, are you running the Sales Academy through your LinkedIn page, or do you have another website for that?
Through my LinkedIn page, but in the next 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to see a website. So stay tuned on that.
Stay tuned on that. All right, cool. Well, gentlemen, you're two people who I really admire and frankly study for how to do this thing well. And I really appreciate your time today. And I think this conversation is going to be really helpful to people earlier on in learning to find their way around LinkedIn. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, man. Tony. Appreciate the opportunity and love seeing your growth and your content on LinkedIn, Tony.
I appreciate you.
Proud of you, brother.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. If you had a nice time, I would so appreciate if you could go over to your podcast app of choice, i.e. Apple, subscribe, leave a rating, and if you're feeling really generous, a review. I have a book out in the creative arena. It's available on Amazon. Quick read, and we're up to, I want to say 21 reviews. I had a dream, this is just coming to me, where I got 2 1-star reviews. So it had pulled down my review number from 5-star. People have been very generous and very gracious, down to something like a straight 4. That's really funny. I hadn't thought about that dream until right now as I'm saying that. The show notes, we will have links to everybody's LinkedIn profile, as well as where you can find other stuff about what Salman and Darren are up to. And thank you, as always, for your time and your attention. I know you've got no shortage of options, and I really appreciate you. See you out there in Linky Land.